In the shadow of Houston's skyscrapers, on the 40th floor of Richardson Tower, David Richardson sat at his desk. This 45-year-old man was the owner of Texas's largest real estate empire. Crystal pen holders, gold-plated telephones, and achievement certificates adorning the walls. Everything was perfect. Everything was as planned. He was looking out the window. Below, people who looked like tiny ants were walking hurriedly. Some were going to work. Others were returning home. David was different from all of them. He only knew how to win. "Mr. Richardson," his secretary Linda knocked and entered. "The final paperwork for the Memorial Park project is ready. Just one signature left." David picked up his pen. Memorial Park. It was one of Houston's oldest neighborhoods, evicting the elderly people living there, demolishing their homes and building a luxury shopping center in their place. For him, this was just a business deal. He had no emotional attachments. "How many families are left?" he asked while signing. "Just one, sir. A 73-year-old woman, Margaret Williams. She still refuses to move." David frowned. He had encountered such resistant people before. Usually, a little money was enough. Everyone had a price. "How much did we offer?" $50,000, sir. "But she won't accept. She says her house has memories that she can't leave there." David stood up. He straightened his Armani suit, looked at his expensive watch. It was 3 p.m. He needed to handle this quickly. "I'm going by car. Let's finish this today." When his black Bentley entered the narrow streets of the Memorial Park neighborhood, David couldn't help but look around. This place was once considered the heart of Houston. Now there were old, worn houses, cracked sidewalks, and faded gardens. But in David's eyes, these were just obstacles waiting to be demolished. When he arrived at 1847 Elm Street by car, he saw a small house. It had white wooden walls and a blue door. Roses and daffodils grew in its garden. An elderly woman stood in front of the door. She had a small suitcase in her hand. David got out of the car. This elderly woman must be Margaret Williams. When the woman looked at him, David noticed that her eyes were red. She had been crying. "Mrs. Williams?" David approached. "I'm David Richardson. I came to talk to you." Margaret looked at him. She looked for a long time, as if she was trying to recognize him. Then, slowly shaking her head, she said, "I know who you are. You're after my house." "That's right," David replied in a cold tone. "But we're making you a very fair offer. $50,000. No house in this neighborhood is worth that much." Margaret smiled. But this wasn't a sweet smile. It was a bitter smile. "Do you think money can buy everything, Mr. Richardson?" "Yes," David answered without hesitation. "Everything has a price. You just haven't told me the right price yet." Margaret put her suitcase down. She took out a small, old photograph from her pocket. The photo was faded, its edges worn. "Look at this photograph," Margaret said, extending the photo to David. David took the photograph. In it was a young woman and a small child. The woman looked like Margaret, but 40 to 50 years younger. The child was about 2 to 3 years old, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she said, "this is my son. His name was David." David's heart stopped for a moment. His own name. It could just be a coincidence. "Where is he now?" he asked. Margaret took a deep breath. "I don't know. I lost him 45 years ago. He was very small. I got sick, was hospitalized. We were very poor then. Child Protective Services took him. They never told me where he was." David looked at the photograph again. In that little child's face, he seemed to see something of himself. But this couldn't be possible. "I grew up in an orphanage," David murmured to himself. Margaret's eyes widened. What did you say?" "David Richardson. I was born in 1978. Margaret's hands began to tremble. "Were you born in Houston?" "I don't know where I was born. There was nothing written in the orphanage records. They had just given me the name David." Margaret swayed forward. David lunged forward to catch her. "My son," Margaret whispered. "You're my David." David's world spun. This couldn't be possible. This woman couldn't be his mother. He was the rich, powerful David Richardson. This old, poor woman couldn't be his mother. "No," David said, stepping back. "This isn't possible." You can't be my mother. But Margaret took out something else from her pocket. A small blue toy car. It was made of plastic. Its paint was peeling. This was your favorite toy, Margaret said. You always carried it with you. The day I went to the hospital, you were playing with this toy. David looked at the toy. He saw something else. Under the car, in very small letters, David was written, in a child's handwriting. At that moment, David's mind became confused. He didn't remember anything from his childhood, his first days at the orphanage, his 3 to 4-year-old self. Nothing. My mother? David's voice was trembling. Margaret nodded, crying. I've been looking for you for 45 years. Every day, every night, I wondered where you were, whether you were okay. David fell to his knees. This man in an expensive suit, this powerful man, suddenly became a small child, that child who had cried for his mother for years. Why? David's voice wouldn't come out. Why didn't you come to get me? Margaret's tears increased even more. I did come, she said. I came the day I got out of the hospital, but it was too late. They said they had given you to another family. They wouldn't tell me where you went. In the 1980s, the rules were very different. Poor mothers had no rights. David stood up, hugged Margaret. That embrace he had missed for 45 years. He still remembered his mother's scent. I was trying to evict you from your house, David said, crying. I know, Margaret replied sweetly, but you're my son. I forgive you. A crowd had gathered around them, neighbors, passers-by. Everyone was watching this scene, the rich man and the poor woman, mother and son. David stood up. His eyes were still teary. Mom, he said, we will never sell this house. This is our home. Margaret smiled. But your project, the shopping center? David shook his head. No project is more important than your house. We'll make this a park. Margaret Williams Memorial Park, named after you. That day, David Richardson became not just a millionaire, but also a son. Money could buy him everything, but nothing could buy his mother's love. When evening came, David was sitting in his mother's small house. Margaret was showing him photographs from his childhood. That little blonde-haired child. That was David. I prayed every night, Margaret said, to see you again. David held his mother's hand. I'm not going anywhere now, Mom. I won't lose you again. 3 months later, a big ceremony was held at Memorial Park. Houston's largest park was opening, Margaret Williams Memorial Park. At the entrance of the park was a bronze statue, a mother and son, hand in hand. David's company now worked on different projects, orphanages, elderly care homes, housing projects for poor families. Money is just a tool, David would say now. What matters is what you use it for. Margaret would sit in the park every morning watching her grandchildren play. Yes, David had married and had 2 children. Margaret Williams was finally a grandmother, and every evening David would visit his mother, telling her about the old days. Even though he couldn't remember his childhood, Margaret told him everything. Remember, Margaret would say each time, you are my greatest treasure. No money is more valuable than you. David would smile and kiss his mother's hand, the greatest treasure he found after 45 years. It wasn't money, it was love. This story shows us that sometimes the things we've lost appear before us when we least expect them. David Richardson lived for money, but what he was really looking for was love. And he found that love in the elderly woman whose house he was trying to take. He had earned millions of dollars, but he learned his greatest wealth that day. A mother's love cannot be bought with any amount of money.